Tonight, ahead of visiting disaster zones in North Carolina and Florida, President Trump drills down on immigration and the border.
Because they took their street gangs and they moved them into the United States.
Even as his executive order on birthright citizenship lands in court. Plus, the stage is set.
This is why we march.
And thousands come to Washington to end abortion. A preview of this year's March for Life. And emotions run high.
It felt like we were at war. And, excuse me.
As the wildfires expand in Southern California, weary firefighters working nonstop receive help and care. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. A major setback for President Trump's immigration crackdown. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
And I'm John Jessup here in Washington. Well, even as John Ratcliffe wins Senate confirmation as Trump's new CIA director, one of the president's first executive actions lost its bid in court.
A federal judge in Seattle, a Reagan appointee, temporarily blocking his attempt to end birthright citizenship, calling the measure blatantly unconstitutional. Trump's order seeks to limit birthright citizenship to just children of U.S. citizens and green card holders, a move critics say violates the 14th Amendment. The case is one of 5 lawsuits brought by Democratic attorneys general. This judge's decision blocks the policy from taking effect for 14 days.
We came to the courthouse today to defend the United States Constitution, to defend democracy in America, and to defend what it means to be an American citizen.
And Trump is also facing backlash for another immigration decision, this time canceling travel plans for refugees who were previously vetted and approved to enter the United States. Meanwhile, on the southern border, the first of 1,500 active duty troops are arriving to help monitor illegal border crossings. This as Trump prepares to sign the bipartisan Lake and Riley Act, named for the Georgia nursing student killed by an undocumented migrant. The law requires authorities to detain undocumented migrants charged with crimes like theft and assault of a police officer. And joining us now to discuss some of Trump's executive actions is Matthew Sorens, Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at World Relief, and Brad Jacobs, Associate Dean and Professor at Regent University School of Law. Gentlemen, welcome. So, Brad, we'll start with you. Your reaction to the judge's decision here to block Trump's birthright citizenship executive order. It does look like Trump will appeal. Do you think he has a case?
Well, he has a case. It's definitely not an ironclad case. We know for a fact the president cannot end birthright citizenship. It is in the 14th Amendment, Section 1. All persons born in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state where they live. He can't make that go away. He can't change it. You would need a constitutional amendment, which isn't going to happen in today's environment. The trick is those little words in there where it says, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And the argument Mr. Trump's folks would make is that if a 9 months pregnant woman coming from Central South America finds a spot where there's no wall, crawls in over the border and gives birth, that baby is not a citizen because that woman was evading the jurisdiction of United States laws. She did not enter legally, and therefore the baby does not get citizenship. The argument on the other side is she's now subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, whether she wanted to be or not. If she commits a crime, she'll be arrested. If she speeds, she'll get a ticket. There's no clear answer. There's no clear history, number one, because the Congress that wrote the 14th Amendment was thinking about giving citizenship to the freed slaves. They weren't thinking about border babies. The Supreme Court has decided one case where they said that you don't have to be a U.S. citizen to get birthright citizenship. And it seems to be pretty clear from that case that if you are legally in the country, whether you're on a permanent visa or a shorter term visa, student, work, whatever it may be, if you're legally here and you give birth, your child has citizenship. But there's never been a court decision on someone who entered the country without legal process. And I think the majority of scholars believe that that person still has birthright citizenship, but Mr. Trump's team is making the minority argument, but it's not a crazy argument, that in fact it doesn't apply to them. You have to come legally into the country to claim that right for your kids.
Matthew, I want to turn to you and this decision by the Trump administration to suspend refugee resettlement, even folks who were presumably on planes, boarding planes to come to the United States. I know that you work in this venue. What does that mean for families who are now left in limbo?
Yeah, so this is a very separate situation from the question around people who may be here unlawfully, because refugee resettlement is a legal immigration process, one that has been around since at least 1980, from a law passed actually with unanimous consent in the United States Senate. So this is a bipartisan priority that allows the United States to bring in people who've been carefully vetted and who have been determined by our government to have fled a well-founded fear of persecution. And many of the refugees who fled persecution is actually persecution on account of their faith in Jesus. So we're really concerned about the suspension in the refugee resettlement program. I mean, we have individuals who are family members here in the United States who had a date when their relative who's a refugee was supposed to arrive in the coming weeks, where unfortunately we've had to tell them that they're, for the moment at least, not going to be able to arrive. At the same time, it's open to reconsideration. So the president's executive order has said that after 90 days, he's going to take the advice of the Secretary of Homeland Security and of State of whether to continue refugee resettlement or resume refugee resettlement. And our hope and prayer is that President Trump, who has said he values legal immigration, who has said that he wants to stand with the persecuted church, will recognize that refugee resettlement is a really important way to do so, and actually to help secure our borders. Because when you give people legal opportunities to come to the United States, there's less instances where someone is desperate enough to come and come to the border without permission.
Gentlemen, if you can, in a sentence or two, we just have a few seconds left, your thoughts about authorizing ICE to make arrests inside churches. Brad, we'll start with you, and again, just real briefly.
Churches have always been seen as places of sanctuary. I think both politically and legally, you're on really shaky ground if you don't preserve that idea of sanctuary.
All right, and Matt?
I think we've heard from a lot of churches where people are afraid to go to church this Sunday, and mixed status families where they're afraid their families could be separated, and we don't want to see the government interfering with churches bringing people in to hear the gospel.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. We are out of time. Great to have both of your insights this evening. Thanks.
Well, in other news, President Trump is working to follow through on his America First campaign promises.
Today, he sent a warning to global leaders at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. CBN senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright is here now. Kelly, what did President Trump discuss in his address to the World Economic Forum?
Jenna and Johnny talked about a lot. The president putting front and center America first before 3,000 members at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, talking to the rich and powerful about the merits of doing business with America, stating that America has changed and to come to America where it's open for business with everyone. He made it very apparent and very clear that he wants Saudi Arabia to be involved in America, and even talked about the fact that America has received billions of dollars thus far from Saudi Arabia making an investment. Watch this.
Saudi Arabia will be investing at least $600 billion in America, but I'll be asking the Crown Prince, who's a fantastic guy, to round it out to around $1 trillion. I think they'll do that because we've been very good to them. And I'm also going to ask Saudi Arabia and OPEC to bring down the cost of oil.
And Jenna, here's something very important about what he said in bringing down the cost of oil, having Saudi Arabia to do that, because he stated if Saudi Arabia does that, it would likely end to an immediate end to the war between Russia and Ukraine.
Oh, interesting.
One thing very important, I really would like to be able to meet with President Putin soon and get that war ended. And that's not from the standpoint of economy or anything else. It's from the standpoint of millions of lives are being wasted. Beautiful young people are being shot in the battlefield. You know, the bullet, very flat land, as I said, and the bullet goes, there's no hiding. And a bullet, the only thing going to stop the bullet is a human body. And you have to see, I've seen pictures of what's taken place. It's a carnage, and we really have to stop that war. That war is horrible.
Kelly, President Trump was also asked about how he's going to deal with China. What's he hoping to accomplish here?
First things first, he wants to really strike an accord with President Xi Jinping, and talking about the fact that President Xi had called to congratulate him becoming the President of the United States, but also stating that he likes the President of China and really would like to see something get done along the lines of reducing the trade deficit between the two countries and having a better relationship with them, even going so far as to say they had a good relationship until COVID hit. And the president basically stating that they must be able to sit down and talk to each other in order to move America forward and to bring China and the United States of America into a better relationship because of what's at stake around the world.
All right, senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright. Thank you, Kelly.
Thanks, Kelly.
Sure.
Up next, the March for Life returns to Washington, D.C., and a big name will be speaking. We'll tell you who after this.
Welcome back. Tens of thousands of pro-life supporters are preparing for tomorrow's annual March for Life right here in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and today we learned Vice President J.D. Vance will address the march in his first public appearance since being sworn in. This year's theme is Life, Why We March. Organizers say it will focus on celebrating the humanity of each person and highlight critical resources available for both mother and child. You can watch the events live on the CBN News Channel and CBN News YouTube page. All right, Katie Glenn Daniel joins us now. She is the State Policy Director at the Susan B. Anthony List. Katie, welcome. So this is always a big event, and now we know Vance will be there in a big show of support from this administration. What do you anticipate, Katie, it'll be like working with a second Trump administration?
Well, we hope that this first week of the second Trump administration, all the positivity here in Washington, D.C., really just keeps the party going, quite honestly. There were so many great strides made for the pro-life movement by the first Trump administration, and so we see that really as the jumping off point for so much that we can do, especially now without the Dobbs decision in our way.
So I understand earlier this afternoon, the president pardoned 23 Americans who, one group said, were peacefully protesting abortion clinics. I know the Thomas More Society had been asking President Trump to pardon some of these pro-life protesters who were prosecuted under the Biden administration for violating the FACE Act. I want to ask, what kind of changes do you anticipate policy-wise with President Trump back in the White House?
Well, these pardons are an example of a promise that President Trump has kept from the campaign trail, but also the different tone that we're going to see from this administration. These are all pro-life protesters who were unfairly prosecuted by the Biden-Harris Department of Justice under the FACE Act. Well, hundreds of churches and pregnancy centers were under attack, and they were never the people who attacked them were never prosecuted under the FACE Act. Instead, Joe Biden was going after pro-life protesters. So these pardons is a great first step to seeing the government switch back away from persecuting pro-lifers.
So, Katie, several governors are being honored at events associated with the March for Life, including Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, for their efforts helping to defeat pro-abortion ballot measures in their states. You know, a lot of times the focus is on a federal abortion ban, but talk to us about the role states play when it comes to abortion access.
Well, this is such a great time for both and solutions, and certainly our pro-life states held the line in the 2024 elections. We saw many pro-life state officials reelected, just as we saw many pro-lifers coming up here to Washington. And as you mentioned, we saw the defeat of these pro-abortion ballot initiatives. In my home state of Florida, the pro-abortion side spent over $100 million trying to force abortion into our state. And because of his courage, Governor DeSantis and so many other pro-lifers in Florida were able to hold the line, defeat Amendment 4, and keep our heartbeat law in effect, which is saving tens of thousands of babies' lives.
I want to ask a follow-up, since you're from Florida, and I don't know what's happening in our IFB, but we're getting some feedback. But since you were in Florida, I know that the ballot measure, in order to pass, had a higher threshold, if you will, percentage-wise. Do you feel like if it weren't for that higher threshold, you'd still be winning the argument? Because I think that's the question. Is the pro-life movement, our pro-life supporters, actually winning the argument when it comes to why life matters?
Well, I think you just have to look at states like South Dakota and Nebraska, where there was a win with a 50% threshold. Certainly in Florida, we have that 60% threshold that helped us out. But if you look at some of these other pro-life states, in South Dakota, they won by 20 points. In Nebraska, they not only passed a pro-life amendment that protects unborn babies in the Nebraska Constitution, they also defeated the pro-abortion amendment at the same time. So they won both of those battles. So I think, you know, we have many years of a struggle. The March for Life is a reminder of that, right? We've been marching for 50 years. We aren't going to get everything we want in the first 2 years after Dobbs. But we saw amazing strides in some of our pro-life states in 2024. And so we've got to run with that momentum.
Well, you know, as you talked about the momentum, there have been some setbacks since Dobbs, particularly at the ballot level. In some ways, it seems to expose some disunity concerning things like in vitro fertilization. Your response there, Katie?
Well, certainly people have different positions on that. What we are focused on, and I think what the March for Life is focused on with the theme this year of Life, Why We March, is the fact that every human being has value and dignity, not because of anything that they do, any accolades they have, but simply because they are a member of the human family. So that's something that I know I'll be thinking of as I'm out marching on the mall with hundreds of thousands of pro-life Americans tomorrow.
Yeah, and the other piece to this is focusing on mothers who do choose to keep their children and the resources available to them, as we mentioned in the story leading up to this. All right, Katie Glenn Daniel with Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America. Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, Katie. Stay warm.
Thank you.
Coming up, from bone-chilling cold to explosive wildfires, the latest on the extreme weather wreaking havoc across the United States.
Welcome back. More than 15 million Americans are under cold weather alerts, with frigid temperatures stretching from the Northeast to the Deep South. Crews are working around the clock to reopen roads and restore power after an historic storm dumped snow across the region. Interstate 10 in Florida and Louisiana is still closed. Outside Atlanta, parts of I-75 are also shut down, stranding drivers in the cold for hours. As the snow begins to melt, officials warn of icy conditions.
Underneath that snow is ice. And if you try to put your vehicle on this road, it's going to get dangerous quickly. There's a reason why first responders said that they're not going, or it's going to take them a lot longer to respond to just the day-to-day calls.
The storm killed at least 10 people across 3 states. In some areas, the temperature is more than 25 degrees below normal.
It's cold just looking at that video. Meanwhile, in California, lawmakers approved more than $2.5 billion in fire aid as firefighters race to contain a new rapidly moving wildfire. The Hughes fire, which broke out Wednesday morning, is sweeping through the mountains north of Los Angeles, putting more than 50,000 people under evacuation orders or warnings. In less than a day, it charred nearly 16 square miles of trees and brush, spreading across 30 acres a minute.
We have over 4,000 firefighting personnel assigned to the incident, and we had a very robust ground and air response to the incident that you see behind me.
Authorities describe the fire as a, quote, immediate threat to life. It is less than 15% contained.
Well, 40 miles away, firefighters in Altadena are still working to fully contain the Eaton fire.
The blaze has destroyed more than 9,000 buildings. CBN's Paul Petit shows us how Operation Blessing is helping first responders serving on the front lines.
It's hard to look anywhere in Altadena without seeing destruction. Homes, businesses, a Jewish community center, all gone.
It's like a blowtorch coming through the city of Altadena.
Across the street from these burned-out townhomes is Fire Station 11, one of the very first teams responding to the Eden fire.
I took in those 3 days was probably the equivalent of a 30-year career.
Also on the front lines here, firefighters from Station 66, just up the road.
We had horizontal flames, so one flame is lighting a house next to it.
To say that firefighters in LA have been pushed to the limit is putting it lightly. What these brave men and women have endured over the last 2 weeks, physically, emotionally, and mentally, is even hard for a veteran like Captain Richardson to put into words.
It felt like we were at war. And, excuse me. And, you know, exhaustion is something we deal with. We have to. It's part of the job, and we get through that just fine. But when you go 2-3 nights without sleeping, it starts to catch up.
Showing them gratitude is Operation Blessing's first order of business on this day. They delivered care kits, including everything from sunscreen to wipes to hydration shots.
We had a chance to pray with the firefighters as well. Everybody got together in a big circle and just prayed over them next to their fire truck, and it was a special moment.
Joining in that prayer, NFL wide receiver Andre Bocelli of the Arizona Cardinals.
I just think it's always important to give back, and you know, in time of adversity and hurt, that's the most important time to give back.
These much-needed supplies is just one more way Operation Blessing joins the rest of this community in saying thank you to these first responders.
I've got people that have lost their homes. They're coming up and thanking us in tears, and they're homeless, and they're thanking us. And I'm still processing that.
In Los Angeles, Paul Petit, CBN News.
Still ahead, an adorable debut to kick off the Chinese New Year. That's next on Faith Nation.
Well, finally tonight, a little bit of a cute way to commemorate the Chinese New Year.
It's so cute. Wait till you see this video. Okay, a celebration of the upcoming Spring Festival, a long-awaited appearance from some of China's newest residents. A group of 25 panda cubs, oh my gosh, they're so cute, made their first public appearance today in southwest China. It's part of a celebration of the upcoming Chinese New Year. The theme of the event is Lucky Wishes and Adorable Newcomers, featuring panda cubs born in 2024. The show highlights Chinese Spring Festival traditions and panda conservation, along with sending New Year greetings to people worldwide. The Chinese New Year falls on January 29th this year.
They are so adorable.
We were wondering how much they weigh. I said 100 pounds. Maybe that's a little
Maybe
heavy.
a little less.
Yeah. Either way, they're really cute. That's going to do it for Faith Nation.
Have a great night. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.